So hello, everybody. My name is Danalia Schernfuss. For visual description, I have short brown hair. I have blue glasses. I have a polka dot blue shirt. I'm wearing some woven earrings. And I'm currently in my bedroom with some art and weavings on the wall. Welcome everybody to Disability Hacks, Strategies for Arts Adaptations. This is going to be hosted by SAORI Arts NYC, which if you don't know what SAORI Arts NYC is, it is a nonprofit that does weaving with people with disabilities and or chronic illness. We do that over Zoom, we do it in person, and we offer more services beyond that as well. My name is Danalia Schernfuss, and I am the program manager for SAORI Arts NYC. And we are hosting this talk to kind of hopefully promote accessibility in the arts. And I am joined today by some wonderful speakers who I will have introduce themselves. And I'm actually going to spotlight all of them. So how about we start with Yael?
Hi, good morning. My name is Yael. I have long blonde hair, blue eyes. I'm wearing a blue shirt and a necklace. And I have behind me a multicolored blue, black, and warm colored textile hanging behind me. I'm a SAORI inspired artist from Israel.
Chiaki, are you ready to talk?
Chiaki, you need to turn on your speaker.
Thank you, Yael. Hi, I'm Chiaki O'Brien. I also have a short hair and black hair, and I have bronze glasses on, and I have a khaki green shirt with a little piece of SAORI attached, SAORI hand woven piece attached. And behind me is a many yarn, corn yarn, and I am in my home studio. And I am a SAORI weaver, teaching artist in Minnesota, USA.
Hi, I will go next. My name is Hannah Tishkoff. I am an artist and arts educator based in Brooklyn, New York, and I work for SAORI NYC. And my visual description is that I have light skin and red hair and blue eyes, and I'm wearing a purple shirt with stripes, and I'm in just a white room.
So this is Dana again. So I want to welcome everybody once again to this webinar, Disability Hacks Strategies for Arts Adaptations. This webinar is going to be talking about ways in which we make art accessible. And we hope to do that from the ground up and not just as like an accessory. And so we're going to but we're also going to do this through the lens of looking at different parts of a life cycle. With today, we're going to focus on talking about geriatric or mature populations and some of the adaptations that we do, hopefully, to build in accessibility for those populations to make art in a very natural way. And we're coming at this from a weaving slant, as we are SAORI Arts NYC, and we have weavers who will be speaking, but we also have general art makers who are here today as well. Hannah especially will be talking on the general art side. I've also done art making in many different settings. So hopefully this will be broadly applied as well, what we're talking about. And so today we're talking about specifically, again, geriatric or mature populations and making art with them. And so I'd like our speakers to kind of share what their experiences are with this particular audience. So yeah, Elle, would you like to start?
Thank you. I have a few anecdotes about working with older populations. The first story is a number of years ago, almost 10 years ago, I was looking for a teacher to guide me on how to use my spinning wheel more effectively. I got in contact with a woman named Tony that lived near Haifa, and I came to her and she taught me from the ground up, and I was very happy to learn from her. She considered an expertise in fiber art in Israel. And a few years ago, I was contacted by someone named Melissa, who would be signing up herself and her mom for a introductory to freestyle weaving. That I was running this workshop in the center of the country. Once I got to the workshop, and I made sure ahead of time that every student had what they needed. I have all 3 or 4 different types of looms, including a wheelchair accessible loom with the supportive shelf and the supportive equipment that SAORI provides or has created. It was only at the beginning of the workshop that I realized that the woman that came was my teacher, Tony, who had come with her daughter. Her daughter had explained to me that her mother was in the early stages of dementia. So rather than trying to pull away from the experience of trying to connect with her, I was like, oh, do you remember me from before? I took a step back and I gave them space to experience what they were experiencing together as a mother and daughter, and just to support them in their freestyle weaving experience, because at that point, there was no way that she would recall who I was, and I didn't want to add frustration to her experience of freestyle weaving. So that was one anecdote. What I really took away from it is that it's so important for all of our students to feel supported. So when they come into our workshop, when they come into the room, when we go to them, to the care homes, we can ask opening questions such as, how can we make it more comfortable for you? Do you need a higher chair? Do you need better lighting? Do you want me to speak louder? So a lot of times our work is actually involved in making not only connections, but asking the right questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree, Yael, that asking the right kinds of questions is often kind of the first entry point. And I find that asking questions in a way that are like compassionate to where someone with memory loss at any stage might be coming from is often like the first step you can take. Like it's a kind of constant process of attuning to who you're interacting with.
Hannah, can you give us examples of how, what type of questions would be considered compassionate or a good opening question for that?
Yeah, so for context, I got my start working with geriatric populations and people with Alzheimer's and dementia and memory loss when I started working in the Department of Community and Access Programs at the Museum of Modern Art, which has a wonderful program that has been running for a number of years called Meet Me at MoMA, where people with memory loss and their caregivers come to the museum and receive gallery programs and tours of the exhibitions that are very participatory and sort of process oriented. And so I started working there actually in the fall after I finished college, which was a really, I appreciate that so much. And I think just connecting to the theme of accessibility to the arts across the life cycle, like me being a recent college graduate and then having these experiences where I'm learning so much from the participants who are like sharing anecdotes about their own experiences, or sometimes looking at a work of art might like bring up a memory, or just people who are older in age often has like just so much wisdom to share. So a question that I often might ask if I was standing in front of a work of art with a group, I might ask something like, well, I'll often start with like what do you see, like kind of grounding in the present, instead of like it doesn't matter in that context. And for me personally, in a lot of different art contexts, like who the artist is, like a lot of people think that they need to know all of this like information about an artwork and the time periods in order to like have a meaningful interaction with like in front of artwork, or so I might just ask like, what do you think is going on, or what do you see, or or sometimes I might say, like, if there's a figure in the painting, I might say, like, can we as a group, like, could we maybe mirror the shape, like this figure's position of their body with our bodies? So then, like, we're all in the gallery and people who are able to might, you know, like assume a position, and then it's like, in that way, like everyone has something valid that they can contribute to what they're seeing, because it's just grounded in their experience.
Yeah, and I want to just add to that a little bit, because I also have a museum background. And so a little bit of what you're referencing, if people wanted to look into it, is a VTS, visual thinking strategy. It's very common to use in art museums, and it's very, like, you can look into it. It's like a whole like pedagogy to it, but it is really like, it's very widely applicable to any population. And it's really just being like letting people make their own associations with things. Like, that's the what do you see?
Yeah.
And I've used that in museums as well. When I think of that, I actually think of, I worked at the Transit Museum, and very often there were senior centers that would visit. And that's literally the best question ever to ask, because when you go onto a vintage train and you say, what do you see? The memories flow out, and it's a really wonderful experience.
Daniela, can you repeat the strategy that you mentioned? It's called
VTS. So VTS, or visual thinking strategy.
Visual thinking strategy.
I think that's what it is, at least.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of VTS, visual thinking strategies. It is really, I think, widely applicable, and for just having like an accessible entry point to a conversation about any visual material. And it involves just asking the 3 questions: like, what do you see here? What do you think, or what do you see that makes you say that? And then what more can we find? And then from there, anything goes.
Chiaki, do you want to share some of your experience?
Yes. So I am in Minnesota, and I usually work with older adults when I go to assisted living. So usually I have few people working directly with me, you know, who are the staff there. So I cannot exactly know what kind of problems that each individual have. So they know. So kind of they adjust for this particular older adults to do weaving. But I can ask the staff, you know, what kind of problem she has, what does she need, is she okay? So I usually have a group of people come to the particular room. I bring the rooms, and then sometimes I usually do like 8-week long workshop. Mm-hmm. And then maybe depends on the assisted living, but maybe last few weeks, memory care, you know, people will come with their assistants, and so they can work together as a team. And some people, like a few years ago, I remember this older adults who are very, you know, she is very active older adults that she was helping those people from the memory care. And together, instead of the people who are working, she actually became assistant for this particular person from memory care, even though they didn't know each other. So that was very nice, that good interaction, not the person who are working there, but the individual who lives there. So it's just a kind of probably different system that how I work with older adults. And of course, I have some people come to my home studio who are older adults, but they're just, you know, age-wise older, and they are just healthy. But when I go to assisted living, I have some degrees of, you know, physical disability, just a little bit. But mostly, they don't need much additional equipment. So I just focus that they are socializing each other and they're having fun together.
Yeah. Chiaki, I'm glad hearing you say that they're socializing, that is making me, one of the questions I wanted to ask you in response is, like, how do you know, as you're facilitating programs, and yeah, feel free to answer this as well, like, how do you gauge things are working and when adjustments need to be made. And just the socializing is for me is one of the ways that I am able to gauge the success of what's going on. Is a lot of the programs with older populations that I have participated in and led, I think of kind of primarily as like a social program.
Mm-hmm. So I know usually, these assisted living have many different kinds of events like bingo and social, happy hour for their own at the assisted living. So since I go every week, I kind of remember what to, talk about, what to ask, like how was the bingo, yesterday, or, you're going to have a happy hour, what you going to have, that kind of, so everybody can have the same conversation. And also individually, if somebody told me about something, like I'm going somewhere, then I make sure that I ask, how was the event or trip? So to have a conversation, and of course, mainly I have to be healthy when I go and smiling and just, I have to be the joy to start with. Yeah, so that's I really have to kind of bring, not just working with old adults, just when I do SAORI weaving with all ages and all abilities, I have to be the joy.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I register with that. Having been a tour guide, I'm generally a very quiet, shy person. And so when I go into instructor mode, whether that's doing weaving with SAORI or when I was doing tours, I kind of like put that hat on of the bubbly, active personality, even though that's not necessarily how I am naturally.
Yeah.
So in preparation for this, we've talked about a lot of different things. I think one of the obvious things to talk about is like some of the more physical adaptations that we make for people who, when they have different abilities. And I actually wanted to share, recently I was actually at one of our partnerships, weaving on the loom. And the person who had woven on the loom before was very able, and they were younger. And then there's someone who was more mature, of the mature population, and who came to loom. And I didn't have what's called the like adaptive shelf on, because the other person didn't like it very much. And so I was like, I was like, let's see if this, how people can do. Let's start off assuming that they can do it. And then when this gentleman came to the loom, I noticed he had a very strong tremor in his hand. And I wanted to see if he could hold the shuttle or the boat. So that's what you use to weave with, for people who don't know. It's kind of like a metal or a wooden object they have to push through. And I wanted to see if he could hold it on either side. And I realized he couldn't, but the shelf wasn't on. But he didn't want me to stop to put it on. And so in that moment, I had to make a decision, like, how am I going to help him continue weaving without stopping the process that he's in? And so I did this thing where I walked to either side and would hold the boat for him. Every time he wove one line, I'd hold it, and then we'd weave another and I'd hold it. And while it might seem like excessive or like I really could have just stopped him, I felt like it was right in the moment. And retroactively, maybe I could have recognized that I needed the shelf at first, but I think it was good in the moment that was my adaptation.
Yeah. It's an amazing adaptation that you made from the spot. I think it's also important too that I never want to impose my my will or my ideas onto my students, but the other hand, I explain to them the first thing about learning freestyle weaving, and in particular SAORI, that there's no such thing as mistakes, and it's really important to let go of a lot of preconceived notions that things have to be done a certain way, and that we can really let go. But I also explain too that if something impedes the function of our weaving or doing our art, such as the warp has cross threads, or there's a tangle and it impedes the function, so it's not necessarily a mistake, but we need to pause and to correct it and to fix it. So as what you did was amazing, but I would also add to that too, that, you know what, I have a way to make it even more enjoyable for you and more functional for you. So let's take a few minutes in between switching colors, and we'll add the shelf, and we can continue, and you'll feel that you're going to nurture their independence for them without being condescending, without sort of putting a stop to the energy that they're enjoying right now. At the end of the day, oftentimes our students don't know how exhausting it can be if they don't prepare their bodies accordingly. So oftentimes I have very enthusiastic students that they're pulling on the reed or the Batyah bar with their elbows. And I'll tell them, you know, in about 10 minutes, you're going to start to feel your arm burn. So rather than, you know, treating it like a physical exercise, you know, tilt of the pelvis a little bit, lean back. And I teach little adjustments in order for them to enjoy the weaving process longer, that will be more gentle on their body as well. So it's okay to pause our students, even though they're really, really into it. But sometimes we know that, you know, offering them that shelf or switching to a larger boat shuttle or a shuttle that doesn't have the pin, so it's easier to adjust it in and out, it's much more better to their long-term benefit of enjoying the process rather than having to make do with a tool that may not be exactly right for them at the moment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to show real quick just for a visual reference for people. So that's why. There we go. What we're talking about. So this is a SAORI loom for those who haven't seen one before. So it's kind of a wooden structure with a lot of thread going through it, and then someone is weaving in the front. And this actually has a bunch of the adaptations on it. So when Yael was mentioning the beater bar, that is right here. So there's what we call the reed, and then there's like this metal bar you can add to the reed. And this is what kind of makes the weaving get tighter. It's what kind of like locks it in a little bit, and you pull on it. Now, some people can just do it without the bar, but the bar gives that extra space or less space for you to then grab and pull it for people who maybe need that assistance. And then we've also talked about the shelf as well. So this little orange loop is kind of part of this adaptive shelf. So it's this wooden, what it's called, a shelf that you add to it, and it adds extra space so that you don't have to hold the boat, which is what you use to weave with. So it just kind of takes out a step of having to hold on to this thing, and it gives you more support. So I just wanted to give us
that. Going to mention that the loop prevents it from falling off the shuttle, off the shelf as well. So
Yes.
it
Yeah, so it's hard to see it from this picture, but the boat is right here, and when you slide it, it'll kind of nestle into that little orange loop and keep it from sliding all the way off. One thing that I know we've talked about before is kind of the caregiver care receiver relationship. And this definitely comes into play with a mature population. So what experiences have we had with that?
I love the dynamics that come into play with caregivers and care receivers in different programs that I've done. I find that oftentimes the caregivers really enjoy the programs, which is a testament to, that these programs are important for and valuable for everyone, and that everyone is excited and willing to participate, and that there's something there for everyone. I have had moments where, particularly in the gallery programs at MoMA, I remember this happening, where the caregivers were maybe perhaps more enthusiastically participating than some of the care receivers, which I navigated sort of delicately, because I also encouraged enthusiasm and was always excited to see that, and also wanted to make sure that the participants who the program was the focus of were able to kind of dive in, or at least like have that there was like space for them to feel included.
Yeah, I think some experiences, I've had those experiences where they're over enthusiastic or under enthusiastic. But I think sort of the key to both of those is actually the same thing of, it's easy to treat that relationship as a unit, like one unit of person. And really they're two separate people. They might help each other or work with each other, but they're two separate people. And so you need to talk to them and work with them in that way. So if there's a potential for both of them to make separate artwork, but then to help each other sometimes, I try to go for that. Because then you're treating them as separate people who have separate artistic processes. And if you treat them as one unit, then the art that comes out can sometimes feel like it's being made in one direction and made to look like a certain way, in the perfect way. And again, like talking about SAORI, like there are no mistakes, and showing your individual aesthetic is really important to that philosophy. And so I think, again, it's part of that, making sure it's not one unit unless they want it to be. That way individual aesthetic can come out when making art.
Yeah, that's such a great point, the separating the two. Yeah, I'm also thinking about the relationship that between within with partners, where there's a couple who have been together for a long time, and one of the one half of the couple is experiencing memory loss, and yeah, just being able to kind of facilitate a social and nurturing experience that between the two of them. I find sometimes I'll ask questions like does this from looking at this, maybe I'll think in this piece of art there's I'm noticing that there's a depiction of the weather, and when I think about the weather, I think about what I like to do in the summer. What do you guys like to do in the summer together? What kind of experiences have you two had? And then kind of conversation can just flow from there.
Well, talking about conversation and atmosphere, how do you kind of create that comfortable atmosphere when we're doing these arts programs? What are some of our tips?
My name is Al. I'm gonna jump in here. One thing I always try to make sure that there's a lot of natural lighting, either wide open windows, a view towards nature, so that there should be greenery outside the windows, even if it's an urban area. I'm also very cognizant of the fact when I'm renting space that it has wheelchair accessible bathrooms, and the approach to the building is wheelchair or walker accessible, and easy to get to. Also close to public transportation. A lot of people don't always have access to private vehicles, so public transportation is also something to consider in terms of accessibility. That's from a physical side, but also a financial side. Not everyone has the privilege of having a private vehicle to attend workshops or events. The other thing I try to make sure is in terms of sound. If there's fluorescent lighting, I'm very, very cognizant of the fact that there might be residual humming, in which case that's why I really, really rely on natural lighting, and I will turn off the lights to eliminate the sound. And also to the actual temperature. I do give people a heads up, in the winter to bring a sweater, to bring extra socks, because there's no shoes allowed on the actual pedals of the loom. I encourage them to, bring water, food, and designate an area for them to have snacks, because it's important to be nourished and well hydrated and feeling physically comfortable in order to enjoy the experience. And if they're with a caregiver or with another family member, it's important to facilitate an environment in which they're completely comfortable and not having to feel discomfort in a workshop in which they're supposed to be expressing themselves artistically and connecting with other people and with their family.
Oh, I just had finished at a senior care center just a couple of weeks ago, and most of the places when I go, like assisted living, they have a nice room just for us to do SAORI weaving. But this care center, I was at a dining hall. So my contact person, she was able to move the tables, but there are still people having lunch and tables are here and there. So I have to set 10 rooms, not ideal, like, I usually like to have the rooms in a circle and then the materials on the middle so people can see. But this place, I have to kind of make the, bring the room to whenever the space, it's comfortable for them to sit and weave. So they were kind of all over. And then still people in and out. So there are many traffic, but which was good because some people even, didn't know what's happening. And then they happen to be there. And then, what are you doing? And then more socializing happening. And then people started showing. And this contact, my person who I worked directly, she was a very fun person. She starts singing and makes jokes, and she even promotes my studio every week. And I just have to go with her. I feel like we are comedians. And so the atmosphere sometimes not ideal setting like I usually picture, but you have to just be flexible and go with it. And sometimes, like I said, more traffic's coming instead of just a closed room. So in a positive way that I think, many people even didn't try it, but saw and talk to the weavers, what they are doing, what they're creating. So it's kind of different atmosphere and a mood. And so I find more positive than negative.
Yeah.
Yeah, for weavers each other, they were so far away, they couldn't talk much each other, but people who are passing by, they were able to, interact each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Chiaki, thinking about being flexible is reminding me of the program that I led I was a program coordinator for a year for a virtual arts and culture program for people with Alzheimer's and dementia, which was an adaptation that we made due to COVID and posed some sort of interesting, there was definitely things that, because we were virtual, were things that worked really well and things that are like you describing, like natural lighting and nature being visible, like that all sounds so nice and is definitely something that's harder to come by when you're working virtually. But I always like to start with like a really friendly attitude and like even sharing things about myself. Like I find, like people don't know me, and like I like to share about how I'm doing and how my day is doing, and like, encouraging, if I'm going to encourage people to like open up to me, then I think it only makes sense for me to begin by opening up to them. And one thing that I always have to remember, particularly with mature populations, is to speak slowly. I find that particularly if I'm a little nervous, I'll start speaking really, really quickly. And it's just a great reminder to like slow down and just listen and let my curiosity kind of guide me.
I like that you're mentioning Zoom, because Zoom is interesting for older populations because for some it's extremely challenging because of the tech barrier. But for in many ways, it actually was a boon for a lot of people who felt isolated, who couldn't leave their house because they're immunocompromised in some way, or they're disabled and can't leave their home for whatever reason. All of a sudden, all these opportunities for art making like opened up because of Zoom. And we've had a response from people who were very thankful that there were Zoom workshops available, and they don't want them to go away as people get more in person, because it's been this great boon for a lot of people.
And there ends up being this sort of, among educators, like this sort of debate over like virtual or in person, and my experience, particular after I was helped coordinate this program that switched instructors every 8 weeks, and we did like dance and music and horticulture and visual art and so many different mediums. And I just feel like it's just great to have both options. Like accessibility is just all about having many options available. And yeah.
And we were talking a little bit about like, you can't pick your environment all the time. Zoom is one of those. That it's not easy to pick your environment in that way. But also, like we were talking about with care centers, you can't always pick like how things are arranged. And I think specifically with older populations, like it can be difficult depending on what setting you're placed in. Like you were talking about with the lunchroom, if it's a tight squeeze, mobility can be really difficult. Anytime I go to any of our workshops, I always thinking about where the chairs are. And I'm rearranging them. If someone's getting up, I'm like, I got to move this over here and this over here, and this table shove a little bit, just to make like as much space as possible for people to maneuver, and thinking about the pathways of how people get to things.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is hard because this care center, 100% of the residents there were either, wheelchair or they were in a walker. So it was, we have extra, space to do it, the extra path, and I have to always worry about, I'm not blocking them or the chairs are not blocking them. Even the people who wanted to observe us, we are not interrupting them. And also speaking slowly, but that particular care center, since they were far away each other, and then they needed a lot of help winding bobbins, because it was hard even for them to stand up. And even the reach to the winder. So I did most of the winding, even though I prepared enough bobbins, but at the end of the 2-hour workshop, there aren't many choices for them, which is not good. So, I was winding and somebody said, well, I want yellow. So I was kind of back and forth, like this corner of the room to that corner of the room. And then one person said, Chiaki, slow down. And she said, we are all so used to waiting, so you don't need to hurry up, slow down. And I, looking around, yes, they are all in a wheelchair. They need somebody to push them, They're all, so I was the one kind of making them kind of hustle. So I was kind of not a, good, keeping a good mood, because I was going so back and forth. I was, she's waiting, I have to wind this bobbin. But I thought, yeah, maybe I should just slow down and they can wait and I can just slow down. So I learned this from this care center. I need to speak slowly and move slowly.
Yeah.
I've been in your position, Chiaki, also with the winding. I can prepare as much bobbins as possible, but at the end of the day, things get used up. And my general approach is to show them, okay, I'm going to show you how it's done, but I don't want that to take away from their weaving time. So I want them to learn, okay, this is how it's done. And then if you need extra help, and I go around from student to student and ask, do you want me to wind you another color? Is there something you're looking for? And I do it in a slow motion, just like I had to learn to slow down also, but I sometimes feel like almost like a flight attendant going from seat to seat, like, what can I offer you? What would you like? And I do it preemptively, because then that way I don't find myself torn between, serving each of my students. But I go from student to student and say, okay, does anyone need another color? And just go from there. Because the most important thing is to foster independence for them. But sometimes fostering independence is not the objective of that particular workshop. It's just the experience. So we can give them the tools for the independence if they want to continue in the future. But for that moment, it's an experience. We want them to enjoy the weaving experience as much as possible without always having to stop and wind and fix and stuff. We can do that for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important, like let them be independent as much as possible. Less help is better, and they can have their, gain confidence, and then more, I think, joy. So I like to share just a couple of pictures.
Well, so we can see the loom and we're seeing the winder.
Okay, good. Okay, I can't see it, but I will talk. So I have this particular individual who has very severe disabilities, and then you saw the shuttle tray, and but she doesn't have the extended bob, but she doesn't even she's not able to use her feet pedals. But when she winds, so I try to have her wind her bobbin, and it's hard for her to grab this winder. So I just made a little cardboard. The handle is a little longer, so she's easy. Still, she needs help, but easier for her to grab the whole thing. And then we just help her arms to wind. So she's a part of bobbin winding. Also, this is also her father has idea that the cone, he put a little stick through the cone. So, and he holds while he's winding. So we just try to, we have to be very creative that way, what this individual can do to weave, even just a little bit, to make her happy, and do this weaving process.
I find that we always have to be innovative, that sometimes tools are what we make. So that adaptation with the cardboard is brilliant, and I love it. I didn't realize that we can order these the bar extenders. So what I've been doing is I've just been using extra cloth or extra rope on the side of the Batyah bar. And I have students that were limited in their reach, and so it's just easier for them just to grab the rope from the side. Also, you can anchor the rope so the reed doesn't fall all the way back to the heddle, it only goes part way, so they don't have to reach as far as well. I find that the beauty of being creative and being artists is that we always find innovative ways to make things work. Sometimes we have to weight things down, sometimes we have to innovate with tools, with tape, with cardboard, with whatever we can find in order to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just want to reflect what I'm hearing coming up in our conversation, which is that the adaptations that we're making as instructors just reflect the creative process itself. And that's just like one of the things that I appreciate so much about, like, I am learning every time I'm leading a program, like I'm learning so much through practicing, slowing down, being flexible, being curious, and all of these things that are like so important to practice. And particularly dynamic between me being a younger person and working with someone who is older and wiser than me. Like, it's so important for me to just remember how much I am learning from that facilitation experience. And it just sounds like you guys are experiencing that as well.
And I want to also talk about what Yael has said before, which is it's not about what someone can't do, it's about what you can do. And that applies to the instructors as well. Because I really like that you did the cardboard adaptation. Instead of going, oh, this person can't wind the bobbin, you said, no, what can we do so that they can wind the bobbin? It never go from can't, it's what can happen.
Right, that goes back to asking the right question. What can we do to make this work? And that's what it comes down to. I've seen also, you know, using the pedals. Oftentimes it's really hard for people to keep both feet on the pedals or to reach the pedal. So I've made pedal blocks. So I would put blocks, additional, like it's like kids that used to have training wheels, kind of like blocks that go on the pedals. Some people have not enough flexibility with the ankles. So I encourage them just to use one foot at a time, or a toe. So even though it's very, all the SAORI equipment, very user friendly, but oftentimes the user experience is different. And so we need to figure out, okay, what more can we do to fill in the gaps to make this much more easier to use? And that comes down to be very innovative and seeing what can we do to make it better.
Yeah.
We are coming towards the end of our discussion as a panel, and then we're going to open it up as a discussion with everybody for anybody who would like to talk. But before we get to that, something I really want to talk about is like, so we've all worked with this population. What kind of art has kind of come out of these situations?
I love this question. Just art. Well, I'm like, do I have? I just have like a vision before in my mind of like all of these different wonderful art pieces that I've seen over the years. I just think it's so. Well, somebody else answer the question. I'm too excited. And
I mean, I would like to share, like, oftentimes with an older population, they'll forget a step. Like they'll forget to switch their feet when they're weaving, let's say. And I'll sometimes lean into that. I'll let them forget. And then just remind them every once in a while, like, oh, maybe switch your feet now. And what that does is it creates like a lot of yarn that builds up in one section to make a ridge. And that in and of itself is a beautiful thing. Like, yeah, the quote unquote normal way to weave is to, you know, have, you know, thin sections that you keep switching the warp for, but sometimes that forgetfulness in and of itself creates that really wonderful aesthetic beauty to a weaving. And same thing.
I call it double weaving when my students do it. And I'll just draw their attention to it. And I said, you see the difference between this line and that line? I said, you did an amazing thing. You did a double weave. And then I said, like, you know, you do that when you don't switch your feet every time. Okay, now continue. So rather than pointing out as mistakes, it's like, okay, it's a design element. It's something different. And it's just something that they can be aware of. I've had a child weave, I think, back and forth maybe over 50 times before switching their feet. And their father pointed out to me, and I said, oh, okay, now we're going to show them how to switch their feet in between. But, you know, it's not a mistake. It's something that they're learning, and it's very interesting. And now we can move on to another technique as well.
Yeah, also, many people like switching the pedals. Also, you know, it's I just call it happy accident. The shadow goes above the warp, so the weft, the yarn goes horizontally, goes over the warp instead of going in. So that happens to many people, and it happens to me too. And, you know, some people say, oh, what did I do here? And, you know, that's my job to say the positive way. Oh, it's a happy accident. And it's a design element. It's actually called floating technique. And so just bring everything positive way. And they say, oh, I made a design? Or I don't know how I even did it. So that's why it's called happy accident. And it's a design element. And yeah, that's our job to make things, you know, positive way. It's very important for SAORI.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right now I'm thinking about a situation that happened during a program that I led at MoMA, where we did some art making after doing a gallery program. And one of the everyone's an artist, one of the participants was like really getting into, I think we were doing collage, and was like, just like the creativity was like really flowing out of her. And she shared that her husband, who was no longer living, was an artist and had made art for like their whole life, and that she always like took a kind of back seat, and that she was like so excited that she had this opportunity to create, you know, she was probably like in her 80s. She was like, I've just like spent my whole life with my husband being the artist, and I never thought of myself as an artist. And she was like, I'm like so excited. She was like wanted to try it when she like got home. And I'm always just touched by, you know, like creativity and learning never stops.
And I also think that for people who are older, there's so many memories and so many associations that you've just built up over time. And when you create art at that time, at that life stage, everything just has a strong association. A color has so many associations, the texture has so many associations. And so there's so much that comes out of making art, because everything's really laden for you with a lot. And I think of my late grandmother, she got into a memory loop about this one specific memory about her dog barking this one night that something bad happened. But it was like such a like very specific, very like poetic memory that she had that stuck out to her, and she felt compelled to keep repeating it. And I think that some of that sometimes comes out when you're making the art, is like some of the things that like the most potent memories that you have come out as you're making that art.
Yeah, and I also have some people who participated the weaving program I led at assisted living. So few of them actually they were weavers, and they used to have huge looms at their homes. And so when I started going there, a couple of them said, you know, I used to weave. I used to have this big loom, but I had to get rid of it because I have to be in here, it's assisted living. And so she was just so happy, you know, even though this is what, you know, different than I used to do, because, you know, she was not doing SAORI weaving, but she said it's nice to be back. And I couldn't, you know, believe that I could weave here at this assisted living. So that was kind of a very happy moment. And even though she, you know, she was a very traditional weaver, so she was very, very, very careful. But that's what she done it for many, many years. So just I let her be, you know, on this SAORI room, and she was just happy. And I was so happy to hear that, you know, I'm so happy to be able to weave again.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you go to those facilities, there's lots that you lose in many ways, but it's nice to kind of bring those resources back in. So that's really wonderful. So it is noon, or at least it is EST. And so I would like to switch things over to a broader discussion if people would like to. I know that we have some studios here. We have people who work with different facilities. Maybe people just have strong memories or ideas or things they want to comment on. So I do want to kind of open things up to people. I may spotlight you while you're talking just so people have that visual. But if anybody wants to share something or say something, feel free to unmute, type in the chat if we have any thoughts to start with.
And when people are speaking, if you can introduce yourself and describe yourself, please.
Mm-hmm.
Danalia, I'd like to thank you for facilitating this wonderful conversation. It just opened my mind. It reminds me that art is a reflection of our lives. And the aesthetic beauty that each weaver creates is a reflection of their own experience, ability, and state of mind. And I'm so grateful that you gave us, you and Chiaki and Yael and Hannah, all this opportunity to think about and to learn. Like I did learn new stuff. I blab a lot. So reminding me to slow down is really important. And I thank you for that, Hannah, as well as many of the other concepts that you raised. So thank you very much. I just had to say that.
I'd like to just follow up on what Raya said. I'm Jane, and I'm a SAORI teaching artist and former board member, and I'm a 75-year-old, young-looking 75-year-old white woman with salt and pepper hair, curly, black t-shirt, blue glasses, dangly earrings. I want to thank you too, and I thought this was great. You know, every lot of helpful things. There were two things that occurred to me that I don't think was said when you were talking about speaking slowly. It's also important to look at that person. I was with a friend yesterday who's hard of hearing, and my tendency is to start to talk loudly. And she said to me, like, you don't need to talk so loud, just speak more slowly and look at me. And that was great to know. The other thing with caregivers, I don't think this was said, is sometimes in my experience, caregivers can be overly helpful. They don't understand the philosophy of SAORI, and they don't have an emphasis on letting the participant be as oh no, I've lost my words, as you know, as independent as possible. So that's another reason to give them, if possible, something to do also, so they're involved in doing their own work, and maybe there's then some helping, but to really emphasize that things don't have to be done correctly, you know, that the weaver can do their own improvisation and use the colors they want. And I mean, we've had wonderful weavings come out from once that happens. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I love how the SAORI philosophy just like obliterates this idea that you could do, that there's a way to do something correctly when it comes to creativity. That's been one of the most valuable parts of the SAORI philosophy for me.
I also wanted to speak to your point about hearing loss, Jane, because it's not about speaking loudly. And I do think like looking at someone and also allowing them to lip read is important, but even beyond that is also enunciation and like really pronouncing your words is important. And then sometimes, so I have friends who have hearing loss, and hearing loss is different for different people because it's different depending on what's going on in their ear. And I have a friend who says like they can hear my voice really well because of whatever tone I take, but there are other people who speak louder than I do, but they can't hear them as well because it's just tone. There are some quirks that happen.
Oftentimes they have to do with auditory processing, not necessarily the loudness. So I have hearing loss, and I have a few students that it's very hard for them to articulate what they're saying. So we oftentimes rely on texting. So she will text what she wants to do, because unfortunately I can't understand what she's saying, and she will have a speech impediment, and my speech impediment, and my hearing loss. So it becomes this cycle of what could have been a frustrating experience, but I learned to take a step back and say, okay, how can we, again, ask the right question. How can we make this work? What are we going to do? Okay, let's get out the cell phone, get out the text app, and start texting. And then I understood, because I want to be as respectful to people as possible. Trying to express themselves, it can be so frustrating, especially if you're dealing with a population that had maybe a post-stroke difficulty with speech or aphasia or anything. It goes across the board regardless of the age, that you really just need to find a method that will work. So texting is one of them. If they have a caregiver that understands their needs more in tune. So then you can speak to the caregiver and confirm, is this what they're asking, without being condescending as well. It's important to include everybody in the conversation and not to treat the person as a third party or as if they're not in the room. You include everybody in the conversation. The main idea is you want to be able to understand what the question, how can you foster independence, and how we can communicate clearly and effectively without feeling frustrated.
Yeah.
I did want to read a little bit from the chat. Juniper said, I love the emphasis on true acceptance, making space for our changing needs, and witnessing what participants are bringing to the shared space. Thank you for this conversation. And then we also have someone asking, does anyone have any comments in working with visually impaired or blind?
I didn't introduce myself before because I was so nervous and just wanted to make sure that you understood how wonderful I think all of you have been. So my name is Raya. I'm the president of SAORI Arts. I was a nurse in another life. I have gray hair with some purple. I don't know if you can see it. Dangly hand-woven earrings, which I did not do myself, and some yarn in the background. So I weave at Children's Hospital of New York. I'm recently weaving with a 21-year-old who had sight, but has a tumor that prevents her from seeing now. And the hardest thing for me was actually being verbal in a way that made sense. As you can see, it's a problem for me. But seriously, to really identify what the loom looks like, what the feet do, what the weaving does. I used her hands a lot so she could feel every time that I said something, I would put my hands with her. In that step, I would help her with the shuttle. She caught on very quickly. She could tell when the end of the bobbin was coming because it didn't sound, it made a funnier sound. It sounded looser. So there was a lot of sound that went along with her learning. And she had a memory of color. So we talked about color and what she liked. And then she liked royal blue. So I tried to find a bunch of blues that I had that had different textures. And so we did a lot. Then I'd ask her, do you want something rough? Do you want something that is sharp? Do you remember things that are shiny? And we would talk, we did a lot of talking. And her piece is absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Maureen, who's here, made a bag of her piece, which is phenomenal. I may look for it while you all are talking to show you. But,
I would love to see it.
okay, you take it away, somebody else, while I
So there's someone in the chat actually who shared Carol Larson. Many years ago, traditional weaving, I developed parts of the loom they worked on using things similar to Braille, like using raised rounded tacks used in upholstery to have on each treadle for the toes to feel for placement and treadle count versus patterning. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I had to take her shoes off. It was really hard for her also because of a problem with her feet. So we don't always take our shoes off the hospital. So I took the shoes off and it really made a difference for her and for her feeling the pedals.
There's a lot going on with tactile work, even for my students that are not visually impaired, but it also applies to visually impaired. So when I am introducing just the basics of put your feet on the pedals, one up, one down, I don't specify left or right. It's just open and close. And I actually have them put their hand inside the shed. And I said, now switch your feet. So see what happens, your hand's caught. So we're just basically, all we're doing is we're opening and closing, you're opening and releasing, closing and securing. And that's what we're doing with the threads. So when you bring it down to a tactile level, tactile learning, it really, really helps neurologically, physically, visually, everything comes together and it's much easier to go ahead with the instruction of the workshop, but also for the students themselves. Because rather than say, oh no, is it my left foot now? Is it my right foot? It's more like up, down, open, and close. It's very, very clear what happens.
Yeah.
Locking and unlocking, those are the terms that I use. So.
I had an experience at the Minnesota Academy of the Blind for a week-long residency several years ago. So because I knew I will be working with people who have, hard of seeing, and most of the students actually has, they are not completely blind. Some of them are, and some are actually completely blind and deaf. And so I had all the rooms has textured warp, so they were able to feed it. And like Raya said, I had many teachers help, of course. They were letting them touch the rooms and then the yarn and everything. And I learned a lot from them. Especially like for us who, we all some kind of disabilities. I learned that I cannot make excuse that I can't read because I can't see. They proved that they wove beautiful pieces, and this boy who was both blind and deaf, he was born that way, and he wove and beautiful piece, and his teacher said he can walk without cane by himself. He can even bike in town. So their senses are so, very, very high that we can't even, expect. And so that, we learned so much from them. And I also learned people who are born blind. So like I had a particular boy who are blind, and then, but he said, my mom likes pink, so I want to use pink. And so there is also a marker that smells. Pink is like, for example, peach smells like a peach, and orange marker smells like orange. That's how kind of connects the color. So it's, we learn so much from working with all those populations.
Yeah.
Can I share my screen, Dahlia? There, that's the bag that she wove.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And
Oh,
so,
wow, it's gorgeous.
and you can see some texture over here. You can't see because it's inside, but you see this pink, those feather stuff. She loved that, and she would very patiently pull out each piece of the feather, because I'd say, feel this. When you put it in, then you can find the feather. She loved that. And there's a beautiful example on the inside. I didn't take a picture of that. So you can see I worked a lot with blues. She liked red. I liked purple, sorry. I told her, I said, we start with the purple here. And so and we shared a great, we really had a great time. That's all I have to share and show you.
Okay, I'm Maureen, and I'm
So
I'm a member of SAORI Arts also, and I have brown hair and glasses, and I'm sitting in this swing that looks like a bird's nest. But but this is the inside of the purse, so you can see this really fuzzy material.
Like
That
the
she was just amazing. So anyway, stop sharing.
Thank you.
thank you.
Well, thank you guys. This has been amazing. There was a question earlier on about what size groups people work with.
Oh yeah. When I led tours at the MoMA, I believe our programs were they were capped at maybe like, I want to say 12 or 13 pairs. So a caregiver and care receiver. And then in the virtual programs that I did, we ranged anywhere from, because it was a new program, we slowly had more participants over time. So our first program had like 1 participant. And then by the end, I think we had a program that had maybe like 15 to 20 participants virtually.
When I do assisted living, I do 10 to 12. So that means I take my rooms, 10 to 12 of them, to the assisted living. And of course, I have few people who helps me.
Yeah.
So I have 4 looms that when I bring to workshops outside of my studio. So maximum I can accommodate 4 individual weavers. if I'm doing family collaborative weaving, so again, it's maximum 10, 12, because it would be everyone working together collaboratively on the looms. But I don't really teach more than 4 or 5 people as a large group. Mainly I focus on individual. And over the course of the day, I'll have maybe 20, because each shift, I can have a maximum of 4 people. But I don't do more than 3 shifts in a day if I'm doing a large group, like a large session over a couple of days.
It's interesting that all 3 of us said that we typically work in a range of like 10 to 12 people. That seems like that must be the sweet spot. I also, I saw in the chat, and if I'm forgetting your last name, works at Creative Growth. And I just wanted to say that I did an internship there in college, and I'm wondering if the artist that you're referring to is Monica Valentine, if you're still here.
Hi, I'm here. Yes, it is. I was about to, would it be okay to post a link to a viewing room, with some of her work in it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Her work is unbelievable and had a huge impact on me when I was there.
She's become she actually had this viewing room. She was able to sell enough work that she purchased a SAORI loom with the proceeds from this viewing room, and she now owns a loom. Before we reopened, I was going to her house and weaving one-on-one with her before we even reopened during the pandemic.
Wow.
One really special thing about her weaving style is she pulls the thread to feel the tension, and it ends up looping around one side of the loom, and it has created this signature fringe. So if you check out her weavings that I'll post in just a moment, one side of all of her weavings has this amazing fringe, and it is just a result of the way that she tactilely weaves.
Incredible.
So we'll have to peek that in the chat in a bit. I do also want to mention, sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, Mihoko says that they have a SAORI studio in Worcester, Massachusetts. They have experience working with people who are blind, and it is definitely helpful for them to have a shuttle shelf. Yeah, I would say so too, specifically because oftentimes you don't have a lot of strength in the arms when you're older, and so having that shelf really helps to be able to put the boat into it. So I would say the same thing.
I think having their shelf and is a physical grounding as well, because it orients yourself to the space. So whether you're visually impaired or not, even if it's a basic cognitive awareness of, this is where it's at, this is where it belongs, this is where it goes. Oftentimes I find people they want to use both hands. And I'm always trying to tell them, just use one hand and kind of go with the flow, because when you kind of double gripping all the time, it creates more knots and tangles and frustration. So I try to also kind of develop a choreography. Basically, I try to encourage like a choreography of weaving, where it becomes more of a flow, and it's much more conducive to weaving.
I love I love using the word choreography in this context.
Yeah, I'm a dancer, so I also respond to that.
I did open floor dancing, so that's kind of where it comes from as well.
I did want to mention when we were talking about people who are blind or have low vision, that it is, I hate to say trend, but there is a lot of low vision tours happening in museums and programming that have been popping up. And a lot of it is around artifacts or replicas of artifacts, and being able to feel them and talk about them. And similar to what we actually started off talking about with VTS, visual thinking strategy, it's the same thing, except you say, what do you feel? Basically, is often how a lot of those programs are starting off. It's really the same concept that is broadly applied. You just like slight changes to the wording to change it for your audience.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Right before the pandemic happened, I shadowed a program for people who are blind and low vision at the MoMA, where they were touching some bronze sculptures, and it was so, because I was shadowing, so I was participating in the program. It was so exciting, like thrilling to be able to like touch something in a museum. And yeah, I'm really curious about that.
I think it's a really exciting thing for museums. I'm geeky about it, so I'm going to geek out. But because with 3D printing, it's now a thing that you can create replicas of objects for people to touch. So if there's an artifact that you really don't want people touching because it might, crack it or damage it in some way, now we can create replicas for people to touch and feel and still have that experience. So I just think it's a really cool area that's been opening up, and I really hope museums keep going down that road. I feel like they are getting more accessible. They are thinking more creatively about how to adapt.
Yeah, yeah, and it that feels connected to a lot of what we've talked about in this program about kind of like engaging all of your senses and your body in encounters with visual art. And yeah, I at a museum in Austria, they had Gustav Klimt's The Kiss. That's a beautiful painting, and they just had it 3D printed, and so you could touch and all the textures. And
oh wow,
yeah, which was incredible. And yeah, it's like that's just valuable for anyone. It's just really nice to be able to experience that.
Yeah, I think it's really the intersection of technology and the arts is really thriving right now. And I think it was already, but I also think the pandemic has kind of made things faster, or just made people really think more about accessibility than they ever used to, and how to make those intersections. And I really love that they did the reproduction of The Kiss. I love to think about how that goes into weaving, and of course other art forms too. Because weaving's part of it is that for SAORI is each piece is unique. It's an individual thing, but then what happens when you can replicate it in that way? Right. It's just one of those larger artistic conversations of what is art and how is it made and how is it individual and how can it be replicated? Yeah, I find those questions really exciting. And someone had to leave, but they said that they work at the NIAD Art Center in Richmond, California, and they're about to buy a SAORI loom for their studio. They visited Anne this week at Creative Growth and was impressed with her weaving program there. And I think the link is in the chat for that Monica Valentine's work, which I have seen before. It is very beautiful. I guess I'll close out and say thank you all for joining us. This has been a really wonderful, multifaceted discussion. And I really appreciate everybody sharing their experiences and asking questions. This is the first in what we hope to be a series. Again, we're kind of thinking about the life cycle. We're doing older populations today. We're going to go more into just adult populations next time, and what kind of the unique qualities of that working with that particular audience is. And of course, coming from a disability or chronic illness way of framing it. And of course, arts adaptations, we're weaving, so it is going to be weaving influenced, but then we're also going to talk broadly about the arts and adaptations as well. I really hope that you will join us for another webinar. Keep an eye out.
I wanted to mention also, I'd be happy to connect with art therapists, occupational therapists, and anyone else that's in the healing arts as well, because this is sort of my community that I want to be a part of and I want to expand. And living where I am in the middle of Israel, it's sort of hard to connect to other English speakers with this art background. So I'm searching globally for a wider community as well. So I'd be happy if anyone willing to connect with me. I can put my contact details in the chat as well.
So I am gonna close it out. Thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you in a future time.